Hello, everyone. My name is Jens Jacobsen. I'm going to kick us off today. I am a user researcher with AWS Control Tower. And I go to reInvent every year to do research, to learn as much as possible from customers like you about what we can do better and how we can serve you well. And last year, my project was to talk about control management, creating controls, managing them, monitoring them, and so on and so forth. And we heard quite a bit of pain in terms of how can I cover the breadth that is AWS with controls without bogging down my organization completely. And one of the things I say to customers when they participate in research is that, who knows? Maybe the feedback that you're giving me this year will lead to a feature that will be presented at some stage at reInvent next year. And here we are. So today, we're going to talk about setting up controls at scale in your AWS environment. And since I know probably not all of you are using Control Tower, we'll start giving a little bit of intro so you're situated, know what we talk about sort of in a broad sense. We actually also have a couple of customer presentations where they will tell you how they are using Control Tower today. Then we'll jump into the governance challenges and a demo of the new features we have around controls management. So broad picture, cloud ops. How do you stay secure and efficient while being resilient in the cloud? We do our best to enable you to do that with high productivity, high resilience, business agility, and to save the environment as we're doing so. The broad model for cloud operations, you could probably guess at it. There's setup, there's build and migrate, and then operate. We're going to focus mostly on the setup part today and some on the operate as well. Setting up a cloud governance or a cloud operations system is no easy task. There's a lot of elements to it. And how do you get started? We recommend Control Tower. Not just because I'm working for the Control Tower team, but AWS in general. We have found that customers appreciate being able to basically get a quick start with this. And before I jump in more, let's talk a little bit about the challenges that you face. So on the one hand, you want the cloud. You want to have the ability to experiment fast and respond quickly to change. At the same time, you also want to stay secure, compliant, and within your budgets. So how do you do that? The idea behind Control Tower is to give your builders, your internal users, safe environments to work in. So for you to efficiently provide them with environments that have the right configurations and the right controls in place so that they can be free within that framework. And Control Tower, we definitely recommend if you're starting out with AWS, start with Control Tower right now and build from there. If you already have used AWS for many years, you can still adopt Control Tower and basically extend governance to your existing organization. Now, back one. There. So broadly speaking, what is Control Tower? It is a fully managed service that sets up a multi-account cloud environment for you. And it deploys best practice blueprints and controls. And it lets you stamp out new accounts for your users that have the right controls and the right configurations in place. And it gives you a dashboard to monitor that environment going forward. Little bit more nitty-gritty. We actually build on top of existing AWS services that those of you who are doing this by hand or have done this for a while probably know. So we actually set up an AWS organization for you. We set up AWS Identity Center so that you can manage human access to your accounts. And we also set up logging and config, things that you know you're going to want across all your accounts. And we set up a couple of useful centralized accounts, a logging account and an audit account that has security services, notifications, things like that. And then we, like I said, we give you an account factory that basically lets you stamp out accounts that have a pre-made baseline with a set of controls and configurations in place. Now, what customers have told us is that in addition to that baseline, they also need the ability to customize their accounts for their users internally. And actually today, we just launched support for doing that as part of account provisioning. So now you can create fully customized account blueprints and basically put those in the accounts as you create them as part of Control Tower. And with that also comes 12 partner-created blueprints that you can look at as well. And so now you basically have an environment where you have these core accounts. You can stamp out new accounts for your users to use. And what's next? Well, we mentioned controls. So controls are basically rules, governance rules encapsulated, and they think of them as first a natural sentence. For example, disallow changes to my logging bucket. I don't want anyone to mess with it. And with an underlying implementation. There's two types of them. There's preventive controls that basically stop anyone from doing something. They are implemented using service control policies in organizations, for those who know those. And those basically will always be compliant. If you have them in place from the get-go, they will always be compliant. Then we also have detective controls that detect if someone has, for example, misconfigured something and will then show up on a dashboard. They are implemented using AWS config. And then we have a third mystery type of controls that we will learn more about later today. And finally, we have the dashboard. So the dashboard shows you at the control level, at the account level, and at the OU level whether you are compliant. So you can always go in there and see, okay, do I have any red check marks or red X's that I need to look for? And last thing I wanted to talk about was, I know you are busy people. Every customer in your, how should I say, role that I ever talk to are super busy. And they often tell me that they look at a service, and then there might be one or two features that are missing, and then so they cannot implement it now. And then it takes them a long time to get back to it, look at it again. So here's a cheat sheet, if that is you. So here are some of the features that we have delivered in the last 3 years since we went GA that may have been things that blocked you from adopting it right away. So things like, yes, you can apply Control Tower to an existing organization. You can use it with nested OUs. And we now support lots of regions, including GovCloud. As of this year, that was a big step for us. And also, we added more customizability, especially to the logging side. So you can bring your own logging if you want. So, and as you can see, we've made 44 releases since GA. We don't plan in any way to stop there. We keep working, and your feedback is what really drives all the new features that we add. And now the question is, so how does this work in practice? We're lucky enough to have Kuntal Shah from Pimco here to talk about their journey to adopt Control Tower. And they wanted to make it easier to onboard new services to be used safely in their organization and to provide more customized environments for their builders. Go ahead, Kuntal.
All right. So most of you, if you are from the financial services industry, or you have a retirement account 401k that has investment option from Pimco, you know Pimco. Pimco is a global leader in active fixed income. We have been around for more than 50 years and creating fixed income strategies for every market condition. As of Q3 2022, we have about $1.69 trillion in assets under management. Pimco is headquartered in Newport Beach, California. We have 3,300 plus employees spread over 23 global regions. And it includes 8 trading desks that covers pretty much every time zone. So look us up if you want to learn more. Pimco, bonds that last. Okay, so I'm going to talk next about the Pimco's journey to cloud and our next steps. Pimco started its cloud journey a little bit more than 4 years ago. We identified target platforms, which are essentially PaaS platforms. Platform as a service that give a standard way to build and run applications, essentially pave paths to standard patterns. So we've been migrating applications to these target platforms over the last 3 years. Fast forward to 2023, we were started looking at more AWS services that we wanted to use. Application developers want more, essentially. They want more services and configurations that they can customize their workloads and optimize them. They want to reduce the time that it takes for us to make services available after they are released by AWS. Essentially, they want governance in parallel to agility and innovation and not sequential. They also want secure, best practice environments with preventive and detective controls already embedded. They essentially want things to fail right away if the non-compliance is going to be happening, right? So widely, just fail right now. So preventive guardrails should be baked in. For detective controls, they want to reduce the time that it takes to identify and remediate issues. So finally, one size does not fit all. There are a lot of teams that need to customize the control tower or their organizational policies to secure their environments better without having to override the baseline. So they want the baseline, and on top of it, add their own custom policies. So with this as a context, we started basically evaluating Control Tower, and as the beginning of this year, we started planning the migration, and I'm happy to report that we are now on Control Tower, including the Landing Zone 3.0, about a few months back. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about our experience to migrate to Control Tower, followed by some use cases for which the controls were already available in part of the out-of-the-box Control Tower managed guardrails. And finally, I'll share a wish list of features that we would love to have from Control Tower. So let's talk about the lessons learned. Planning is key. It's like stating the obvious. But if you are starting with an existing AWS landing zone, you need to review the org structure, the landing zone, and the customizations. You have to decide if you're going to use the existing core accounts, which customizations are you going to map to the AWS Control Tower managed guardrails, and which ones are going to continue to stay as custom controls. You will also have an opportunity to look at your organization structure and see if you want to add more nesting. You can group accounts based on either lifecycle, or dev, and prod, or based on whether they have public-facing endpoints or just private. You can always refactor your organizations later, but it's much easier if you plan ahead, and it's much more, much less expensive. Other thing I want to talk about is customizations. There is an existing framework, Control Tower CFCD, that is a great framework to tie your customizations with lifecycle events. So whenever a new account gets created, you can plug in a policy that runs, or when a guardrail is enabled, or a user IAM role is created. So there's lots of lifecycle events that you can plug in And this is going to reduce the complexity and expedite the journey to migrate to Control Tower. So no need to reinvent the wheel. I would definitely recommend using CFCT. One of the key other lessons learned is definitely be prepared to create an operational model once you are on Control Tower. Because once you're on Control Tower, you do need to plan a regular cadence for migrating, reviewing all of the available controls, plan and enable new controls, or manage the life cycles of existing ones. Also, you have to plan the remediation of any compliance issues that you have in Control Tower. So it's in the new operational state that you should plan for as you are migrating to Control Tower. Finally, Control Tower comes with a set of region controls that are really very important for regulated environments like Pimco. So definitely recommend using them. So I'll take a little bit of time to talk about the region controls as a use case for us. And essentially, region control allows us to control access to only regions that we choose to operate in. It could be for a lot of different reasons. It could be because we want to enable the application teams to meet data residency requirements, or it could be just to manage cross-region network and security and cross-region network security and cost. All of this needs to be done while still allowing certain global services to use home regions. So with our previous landing zone, the implementation for this region controls required custom SCPs to be implemented. Each SCP needed to be applied to the organization at the account level, and we needed to maintain SCPs as new services and regions are added by AWS. The hardest part was you need a very highly skilled set of people to really truly understand what exemptions need to be made to services and operations that need to be exempted from these controls. So that's an ongoing, evolving list, and that requires a lot of things. So one of the big things that Control Tower gave us is an ability to delegate that maintenance of the exemptions list to the managed guardrail. So let's talk about a little bit about the region deny control that is unique because it applies to the landing zone as a whole. It essentially doesn't have to be applied account by account, and once applied, content cannot be created or transferred outside of allowed regions. In addition to the region deny, the set of controls, there are a host of controls that are available that prevents most common internet access issues. For example, disallow access to virtual private network, or disallow internet access from Amazon VPC. So all of these controls are baked in, and it can reduce the effort to put the region controls in hours after some planning. So now coming to the wish list. There are multiple ways to monitor security and compliance in enterprise environments in AWS. There are automated security standards like CIS that are done by AWS Security Hub. There are AWS config rules, and there is a lot of different ways to track and remediate based on the tool's independent behaviors. All of this makes it harder to have a single pane of glass view to your security and compliance. So a better integration between these tools and the ecosystem will be a great help. Now, the other thing that's awesome about Control Tower is a dashboard that shows you a view of all the OUs, organizations, and accounts that are provisioned, and number of guardrails that are enabled in each one of those. You can also see the status of your organization and accounts against those guardrails, and if there is a non-compliance, you can drill down and see the actual resources with respect to which you have compliance issues. So what would be great is not only have this dashboard for out-of-the-box controls, but allow custom controls to also surface up in the dashboard and really make it a single pane of glass. The shared responsibility, the most center of excellence or platform engineering teams create a shared responsibility model with their customers, and they need to provide visibility to what guardrails are applied into the accounts so they can know how to build their workloads in context. What is taken care of? What is something that they have to worry about? So AWS Control Tower right now is only available to users with management account access and with administrative permissions. So we really need to have a way to share more details about the preventive guardrails that are applicable to organizational accounts. Another great enhancement would be the ability to create views and share with other users. For example, ability to filter the view based on either a control objective or an organization. And once these views are created, it would be great to save and review them later or share with other people. And lastly, last but not the least, what-if analysis. Essentially, one of the hardest problem you have is before you apply a guardrail, you do not know the impact of applying that. So what would be great is if there is an ability to simulate enabling this control, and you can test and validate the control's impact before you apply them. This will really be a great help to expedite enabling controls and really make it a much more powerful tool to quickly apply guardrails. So I think that's my last slide. Over to you, Jens. Thank you.
All right, I'll just jump in really quick to introduce our next customer speaker, Tom Wollstonecraft from the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. They have actually been on AWS for 10, 12 years and decided to modernize their governance, security, and auditing processes using Control Tower. Welcome, Tom.
Oh, thanks. Hey, everybody. So I'm Tom. I'm the Director of Solution Engineering for DTCC. And I'm guessing a lot of you haven't heard of us before. But we are the premier post-trade financial institution on the planet. We not only centralize, we automate, govern, regulate, and standardize all the processing of financial transactions. So everything that goes across from a stock trade to anything securities, we automate and centralize all of that. We've been in this business for 45 years. So every financial institution, all the ones that you use, are our customers. We operate in 93 different countries and have roughly 6,000 financial institutions that use us on a daily basis. So what does that all mean? Well, we do, just in securities processed alone last year, we did $2.37 quadrillion worth of transactions. So for those who might not know what a quadrillion is, because I had to look it up to verify I did, that is 1,000 trillion, right? And so that number is kind of hard to wrap your head around. So I looked it up, and to buy all of the real estate on planet Earth as it sits right now would only cost you $271 trillion. So as you can see, we're quite a bit more than that in securities alone. Fixed income and clearing, like our last speaker, we work with them for about $4.5 trillion per day. In equities and clearing, we're 202 million broker-to-broker transactions per day. So we work with all of the financial institutions at a rapid pace every day. So when it comes to this, you can understand why our main focus is security, auditability, and automation in all of this, right? Because if we're not that, we can't guarantee any of this. So wherever our data is, whether our applications is, our first and foremost thing is security. So, like we said, we started our cloud journey for the most part in 2012. We started looking to leverage the automation capabilities and the rapid response to changes in application needs right away, since we saw value in that. Starting in 2017, we really started moving our capabilities out there. We built our partnership up with AWS. We went and we actually built in the addendums to the Regulatory and Compliance Administration's rules. So we help set those guidelines to make sure that everything that is done in this space is not only auditable, but secure. We worked with the regulatory bodies to educate them on the compliance of what would be needed to do something at the scale that we operate at. And then, obviously, cost management has to be a key for all of us, right? Again, security is the main thing. But here in 2022, and why I joined the company, is where we have decided to do a greenfield new approach to our AWS platform. We've decided to come in and started from the ground up and build it with the best in breed in technologies, the best in breed in automation, and the ability to actually automate our audit, right? Because I don't know about you guys, but the worst thing in the world to do that I hate more than anything is talking to auditors. So if I can just give them the ability to look at it and say, hey, I know everything that's going on and I don't have to bother Tom, yeah, my day just got a lot better. So that's where Control Tower comes in for us, right? So we have started our next generation. We actually just launched it here recently with Control Tower being the main focus. 2012, Control Tower wasn't even a thing. We had to work on all that. And to build the security up from 2012, we'd use the AWS platform services that were security, but we also had to leverage third parties, and then we actually had to build our own custom tool sets that required developers, engineers. We had to maintain that code set, and then we had to keep up with the regulations, right, to make sure that we were always in compliance. So with that, with Control Tower, what we're going to be able to do is actually automate that from the beginning, right? Because what we want to say is we want to enable our developers, we want to enable our engineers to be able to work, develop quick, empower them to do whatever they need to do, while we can guarantee that the space that they're working in not only meets all of our regulatory compliance, but that anything that they do doesn't introduce a new problem that we know we don't want to have, right? And so what that's going to take us from is that's going to take us from a reactive environment that everybody has. Like we all have problems where we get tickets and people wake up early and nobody wants to do that. We're going to be a proactive environment. So before a problem happens, we've already solved it. And if something is introduced, we're going to be able to automatically react to that problem, and then we're going to be able to make sure that that doesn't become an issue, then catalog that, audit it, and make sure that we can capture that information going forward. I think the benefits of all of these in the cloud investment and what we're doing, I think we're all pretty familiar with a lot of these, right? Accelerating time to market, but risk mitigation, that's the big one. That's the thing that we really focus on, making sure that we don't accidentally introduce risk that we don't want to. With Control Tower, we're going to be able to do that. Improved user experience. This, for me, is developers, right? It doesn't matter if you're developing infrastructure, it doesn't matter if you're developing applications or what. The user experience is the developers, right? Making their experience better, empowering them to do more, not opening up a ticket for this or for that, for them to get their job done, but being able to improve their user experience. IT cost optimization, because everybody who signs my check wants to make sure we don't spend any money. And then making it more agile, making sure that we can, as new ideas come out, as a developer comes up with a new idea, an engineer, a manager with a silly title decides he's heard something on the golf course that he wants people to try, we can respond rapidly to that, try these things out, and adjust to those market trends, you know, as quickly as possible. So that's how Control Tower is going to enable this. It's one of the keystones and the cornerstones of our new environment that's not only going to handle the 2.43 quadrillion transactions in securities, but we're continuing to grow. So in 5 years, that might be 4 quadrillion. But this environment's going to be able to react to that because of Control Tower, automation, and other AWS services. So thanks, guys. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, and she's definitely the one you're here to listen to.
I don't know about that. Thank you. Yep. Thanks, Tom. How's everybody doing today? It's day one, so everybody looks still awake. I see a few people that might be hungover, but not quite yet, everybody. That's the good thing about doing a Monday session is you have alert, awake audience versus a Thursday session or, you know, God forbid you get the Friday session because everybody goes home after replay or sleeps in, one of the two. So definitely hope you make it to replay. So I'm going to go through a little bit more in depth about the features that we launched today. You'll see the launch announcements come out, comprehensive controls management with AWS Control Tower. But before we dive in, we thought it was really important for you to understand first foundationally what Control Tower was, if you haven't looked at it, which Jens gave you kind of that high-level overview of. We also thought it was super important to hear from customers. It's really easy for me to get up here, I'm the product and UX leader of a AWS service, and talk about what I think customers need. But it's more powerful to have customers up here telling you what they need, because what they need is also what you need. And that is also what we were trying to deliver. As Jens mentioned, last year, this time reInvent, we were talking to customers about governance challenges. What are the challenges that you have? How do you solve for them? How can we help? And fast forward a year later, we're actually deploying capabilities to address the majority of the challenges that customers told us about this time last year. So we'll dive in. What are those challenges? First and foremost, time and effort. I don't think many of you have infinite resources, so you probably don't have a bunch of time and a bunch of resources to throw at controls, to throw at governance overall. You need it to be simple. You need to hopefully have somebody to share that heavy burden with. But really, it's time and effort that customers take to do a risk assessment on every AWS service. Then you have to figure out what controls you need in place, not only to address risk, but also to address your common compliance requirements, NIST, SOX, PCI, list goes on and on. You've got to identify the risks, you got to define the controls, you have to implement those controls at scale across maybe one account, probably thousands of accounts in multiple regions. And then you've got to maintain all of that. It can be quite exhausting. Definition of controls alone requires a special skill set. AWS is different. Services are different than in other cloud providers. They're not, it's not right or wrong, they're just different. And if you don't have that skill set within your teams that really know AWS, defining controls can become even harder because you don't have that skill set. Automation. How many of you have more than one account? How many have 100 or more accounts? When did you start looking at automating? Account 1 or account 2? Like right away, immediately you need to automate, right? Because more and more accounts mean more and more overhead. So automating the implementation of these controls at scale is also hard. And we found that customers there's tons of custom solutions out there, which are great. Some customers built some really great solutions, but they don't want to maintain those solutions over time, just like they don't want to maintain the controls over time either. It's a burden. It takes time. It takes effort. And you'd probably rather spend that time and effort building something fun besides doing controls and governance. With maintenance, new features and changes to AWS, we're causing a lot of our customers to have to go back, rethink their risk assessment, look at their controls again. Do I need to change anything? Do I need a net new control? It's really hard and it's extremely time-consuming to keep pace with change at AWS. And when you're trying to control an AWS environment, you have to keep pace with that change. And then the last thing that we heard a lot of customers say, and we heard this from Tom as well, you use a multitude of AWS services, which is awesome, and you should keep doing that for sure. But now you have to navigate across all of those services to figure out, did I turn this control on Security Hub? Is this a config managed rule? Is this a control tower guardrail? Like, where do things live in my environment? And so you're trying to you're trying to go to all these different AWS services to even understand what you've got enabled where from a control perspective. So these were kind of the key governance challenges. Sound familiar? Any big ones I missed? Okay. So how are we going to solve for that in Control Tower? Well, the first thing we did was we said, we're going to share the responsibility of controls management a little bit more with customers. So we have built today, actually launched over 350 new AWS managed controls to meet common control objectives. And I say common control objectives because that is the highest common denominator when you look across frameworks. A lot of services today and a lot of third-party solutions today go out there and you can say, give me my control pack for NIST and go deploy those controls. Give me my control pack for PCI and go deploy those controls. Truth is, those controls overlap multiple frameworks. And so when you're doing it framework by framework, you're not really focusing on what the intent is that you're trying to drive with the control. You're focused on, am I compliant and am I going to pass that audit? And by the way, Tom, yes, audits are hard, and hopefully there's no auditors that took offense to, we don't like to talk to auditors. But that's what your focus is on when you're doing controls, is how do I pass my audit? We're also providing automated control management across your multi-account environment. So we deploy the controls, we orchestrate, Control Tower orchestrates other AWS services to deploy the controls across your multi-account environment. You can apply control to a specific organizational unit. So all the accounts in that control, or all the accounts in that organizational unit have that control applied, or you can do it even at the organizational level across all of your OUs. We provide comprehensive guidance. This was kind of the other underlying gotcha when we talk to customers, is guidance. How do I know where I have control dependencies or where I have service relationships that are going to change the way a control acts? What are these relationships? How do I identify them? And then what do I do about them? So we provide comprehensive guidance on all of the controls, and I'm super excited to show you in the system what this looks like, but we also provide guidance on manual steps. We're being very transparent here. Hey, I can't automate something for you, but here's how to do it. Click on this link, go out here to this documentation, do what this says, and you've achieved that control now. We also have shifted compliance left. That's how I refer to it. So shifting control really into your deployments. Some people talk about policy as code. Some people talk about shifting control into your pipeline. We have a new control type that we launched today, and that's what I will demo and we'll talk about here architecture-wise in a minute. But we have a new control type that is called a proactive control. And that proactive control is going to block any CloudFormation deployment of non-compliant resources. So we've got our preventive controls that will prevent. We've got our detective controls that detect, and we have a new proactive control that also goes in there that will prevent at a deployment level. And then Control Tower is providing you that consolidated view across your accounts and OUs of your compliance status and where you've got controls enabled. Okay, so I mentioned purpose-built controls. We have over 300 now. So they're mapped to the common control objective for each control. They're also mapped to the framework, so you can see which ones apply to PCI, which ones apply to NIST, and et cetera. We also provide severity now. Any Security Hub users out there? Yes, awesome. We have a new integration with Security Hub. It's coming up on the next slide that I'm super excited about. And we've partnered with Security Hub to also apply their severity rating to the controls that we publish in Control Tower as well. So now that you can see what is the most severe control that you're not compliant with, that's probably where you should take action first. We give guidance on the relationships as we talked about. We also give access to the control policy for proactive and preventive controls, and then compliant and non-compliant resource templates for proactive controls. Sorry, I sped up there because I can see my clock and I need to go a little faster. We have multiple control implementation options. We have the preventive controls. These are actually service control policies under the hood. So if you use organization SCPs, so do we. We have the new proactive controls, which is a CloudFormation hook backed by a CloudFormation guard policy. And then we have all of our detective controls now powered by AWS Security Hub. So new integration there. And when you see this in the screen, in the service, you'll actually see all of the controls grouped together so you can see what you need to do to achieve that control objective holistically, whether you just want to start with detect only or you want to enable all of the controls to have the full suite of protection. Okay, let's see. So our proactive controls here. So what happens with a proactive control when it's enabled? As I mentioned, the underlying mechanism is a CFN hook with a CFN guard policy in that hook. So what happens when you enable proactive control is Control Tower is going to go implement that CloudFormation hook across your environment. It's going to register the CloudFormation hook, and then it's going to inspect any CloudFormation deployment you have against the policies that are in that hook. I'm going to kind of breeze through these slides because you're going to see it in the demo, but really what happens here is anytime you enable 1 or you enable 10 proactive controls, it's one hook with multiple guard policies in it. CloudFormation is a regional service, so the orchestration across regions and across accounts and OUs becomes even more important, and Control Tower handles all of that for you. So when the hook is enabled, What happens here is any user in the account that wants to go deploy a new resource using CloudFormation, that CloudFormation is going to be checked against the proactive controls that you've enabled on the account. Any user, just want to make sure that's clear. So any user doing the CloudFormation deployment. The end user will also see a failure. If they're not compliant, they will see a failure in the CloudFormation service itself as well, and they can go and dig and see even more information about the hook in the policy that is being checked. So they have all of that insight into what they need to do to meet compliance so that that resource will deploy. So it's going to be, think of it as a pre-deployment check. It's going to check your resources before deployment and will completely block if they're not compliant. What the engineer or the end user sees on the screen, this is a good example here of a hook executing that failed. It did not provision this update, and you can see it's got quite a bit of information in there about the configuration schema of the hook, as well as the policy and what's expected. Now don't forget, you'll see it again in the demo, but we do provide artifacts for the controls, the proactive controls specifically. We give you a non-compliant resource template and a compliant resource template. And we do that because your engineers need to know what good looks like, and they need to know what good doesn't look like. And you can also use the non-compliant resource template to test the control as well. Okay, so kind of wrapping it all together before we go into the demo. This is the example that we're going to talk through in the demo. This is an example here. The control objective is encrypt data at rest for S3. You can see there are multiple controls that you would have had to have defined. That we've defined and will maintain for you. You've got your preventive control, you've got your proactive control, and you have a detective control. This control objective spans multiple frameworks, and you'll see in the example here in the demo that we also have a dependent control, and then we have an inclusive relationship on a control. And an inclusive relationship means it's a good idea to implement this other control if you're going to implement the first one. It'll make you a little bit more secure. Or it might follow a best practice. So again, giving you guidance on not only the dependencies, but where we think it's a good idea to do something else in addition to. Okay, so here when you come into Control Tower, you land on the dashboard page. As I mentioned, we do have enhancements coming to this page. Work in progress here, but it's the same dashboard page if you use Control Tower you should be familiar with. The main changes are just now seeing the proactive controls here. In this environment, I don't have any non-compliance resources to show, but you get a good view of your entire organization. Also in Control Tower, we have the organization page that launched this year, replacing 2 existing pages, and this gives you that hierarchical view of all of your OUs and all of the member accounts and child OUs that might be nested underneath. For the demo, we're really going to focus on this Blue Moose OU and this specific member account of that OU. We have the new controls library here. You can see, if you go to all controls, you can see all controls in the library there. There are over 350. There's 372 to be exact. You can also change your preferences of this view if you want different columns to show so that you have a view that really shows you what is most important to you. In this example here, I like to show severity, so I can see the severity along with the control. If I'm going to go enable something or check on it, severity helps me think about should I be focusing on this now, or is this low-hanging fruit that can come later? We also have the control library sorted by category, so you can come out and see frameworks, services, and control objectives. So here we have all of the control objectives listed, and if you go to encrypt data at rest, which is the example that I showed on the screen, and we want to see encrypt data at rest controls for Amazon S3, just going to filter here, and I can see there are 3 controls for Amazon S3 for encrypting data at rest. We have the proactive, detective, and preventive control. If I dive into the proactive control, which is the new control type we launched today, you can see a lot more detail about the control. And this is super exciting. I know it might seem silly, like, oh, it's just data, it's just metadata about a control. But it's really important. And there's not a lot of services out there that give you the transparency on the control either, which we're providing through the control library as well. So here you can see everything you need to know about the control, including new unique IDs, severity framework. We have a description. We also have the implementation method. So this is a proactive control. If it was preventive, it'd say preventive, and it would tell you all about how an STP works. We mentioned that there's artifacts here, so you can see in the artifacts tab for proactive control, here's actually your guard rules. So this is the policy that gets executed by the hook when it gets triggered through a CloudFormation deployment. So we give you transparency to that policy, and then also you have the compliant and non-compliant resource templates in here that you can view. If you scroll down, you'll see here's those relationships. We're telling you this proactive control is dependent on this other CloudFormation control. That CloudFormation control is a preventive control, and it's required for proactive controls because what it does is it blocks any of your end users from changing that hook. So it puts an SCP on the account so that no end user can modify the hook that you're going to enable when you enable a proactive control. So we're telling you it's dependent. You must do this. And if you try to activate a proactive control without having that dependent control already enabled, we'll stop you. We're not going to let you. We don't want you to do that. You have to go enable that before you enable the proactive control. Whoops. And then here we have an inclusive relationship, and this inclusive relationship, again, is saying we think you improve your security and compliance posture. You should also enable this other control. Okay. At the top of our mid-screen here, you can see what OUs I've had this control enabled on, which accounts in that OU it is enabled on, and then again, there's the artifacts tab. So this is just a quick kind of run through of what this looks like in the Control Tower console. You can also enable the controls through our new APIs that we launched back in September. So if you're an existing Control Tower customer, you can use that API to enable and disable the controls in Control Tower. So you can approach it console, where you're going to get all of the rich information, the artifacts, the relationship mapping, or if you just want to manage them programmatically, you can do so through the API. Okay, so here we're also going to show you what this looks like from an end user's perspective. So give me 1 second to switch to my other account. It might yell at me. Okay. All right, so now I have my engineer hat on. I'm no longer the Control Tower administrator. I want to go deploy a CloudFormation stack. I'm going to go out to the CloudFormation console in this example to do that. I can see in the CloudFormation console, if I go to activated extensions and then click on hooks, I can see that this hook is activated on my account. If I actually click into that hook, here is the schema and the configuration of the hook. So I, as an engineer, can actually go out there and see, okay, I can see the logic now, what this is going to check, what this is going to look for, to understand not only if I have a failure, but also understand what good will look like. Here, if you go to stacks, let's look at the first example. So this stack we tried to deploy, and you can see the deployment failed, and a rollback actually happened. The end user can come in here and look at the events that caused the failure. So you can see down here, the create was in progress. The hook invocation is here on the right. And then the create failed, and the rollback was then it rolled it back, sorry. And then it deleted, just as it should. And then the rollback is complete. So I can go over here and go into the hook invocation, and it will give the end user detail about the control behind this hook. So you can see it failed, and it actually references the control ID that's in Control Tower, and gives you a little bit more detail about the control itself. So this is transparent to your end users. So if you're the administrator in Control Tower setting the controls up on your account, your end user can still see what's going on here, and that's super important because we also hear a lot of times that engineers just hit walls. somebody deploys a control, the engineer has no idea it's there, and they just hit a wall and they don't know what to do to get past it. So that with the proactive controls, you're getting transparency to all of that. As an engineer, what you need to do to be compliant, and then also as an administrator, providing your engineers with those non-compliant and compliant resource templates and transparency into the policy itself. Okay. All right, I know I went really fast through that, and that was an impromptu demo on my own laptop, and it didn't take me as long as I thought. Is there an area you want me to focus on or go back to and go a little slower? Anything? Yes?
Are you going to be supporting any other states like DCSA state in the categories in the future?
I'm sorry, say one more.
Any other security like guidelines like DCSA state?
Yeah, we will continue to build out the number of services supported, the number of controls for even the services that we support today, as well as more compliance frameworks. So we continue to iterate on the control library overall. Any other questions?
Just to confirm, this is really only going to work if you're using CloudFormation.
This deployment is CloudFormation specific. We do have Terraform on our roadmap for next year. We know a lot of customers use Terraform. Control Tower actually has account provisioning for Terraform. There's a framework that you can follow to provision accounts through Control Tower that you can use Terraform with as well. We will get there on controls, just need a little bit more time. Yep. Question in the back?
I have a question. Is it integrated with GitHub? Because GitHub can call CloudFormation. Will the failure be passed back to GitHub?
I haven't tried that one yet, to be quite honest with you. I don't know. But now I'm going to go test that after this session. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
How will this play with updating an existing stack?
The update will also fail. It's update or create new. If the CloudFormation that you're trying to deploy is not compliant, that update will fail. If you have a non-compliant stack sitting there already, it's not going to do anything about that. It's just going to say, if you're trying to deploy something that doesn't match, doesn't follow the rules, it's not going to let you.
So if somebody's, say, updating a stack, there's 5 resources, I want to update one that's compliant with something else in the stack.
Right, it's only looking at the update that you're doing. To see the non-compliant, you'll want to have the detective control turned on. That's going to check if any existing resources are non-compliant. And like I said, those detective controls are now powered through Security Hub. There's a new Control Tower standard in Security Hub. So when you turn the detective control on in Control Tower, you can also see it turned on the Security Hub side as well in the Control Tower standard. So you'd want the detective control in that instance. Yep. Question here? Yeah.
The Control Tower controls different than the config rules that are implemented through Security Hub? How do they work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that also goes back to the I'm a customer and have to navigate all of the different services to figure out what's going on. So Control Tower orchestrates AWS services. All of our detective controls before the Security Hub integration were all config-based. Security Hub, for the most part, most of their detective controls are config-based. They're config rules. So now, with this implementation, you're turning on Security Hub, but the underlying mechanism is config. And actually, in the Control Tower console now, we just launched this a couple weeks ago, you can actually go in and see your external config rules that you have turned on an account. I was just going to show you that, but I don't think I have any. Accounts with an external config rule turned on, but we're trying to bring that whole view into one service for you. So whether you've gone through Security Hub standard, Control Tower, or config, you should be able to see all of that in Control Tower. We do the same with SCPs. So here, if I go.
So is there overlap between these?
There you can see I don't have any external config rules on. There could be overlap for sure. What the differentiator is, there could be overlap. With the integration with Security Hub, there should be less overlap, right? And that's what we're trying to focus on a control tower perspective, is make this easier, but not recreate the wheel every time. And that's why it's also important to look from a control objective perspective instead of compliance framework, because that control objective is the highest common, and you'll know if you hit that control objective that you've also covered all of the frameworks. So trying to dedupe, so to speak, as much as possible in the customer experience. Yeah.
This new functionality that you're showing us, is this part of the landing zone 3.0 deployment, or do we need to do that?
You do not have to upgrade your landing zone to get this new functionality. It's just there. So LZ 3.0 launched back in July, and is still the current version, but you do not need to update to get the new controls. Oh, awesome. Okay. I think we're at time. I really apologize the demo didn't work. Hopefully it was enough to pique your interest to take a look at it. We'll be in the demo theater later as well at 4 o'clock. It's down in the lower level in the Venetia. And then just many thanks to Kuntal and Tom and Jens also for getting up here and talking to you today. So thanks.